Hi, guys. Thank you for joining me on the show today.
Hey, Andy.
Hi, Andy.
It's a real pleasure. Kev, we've obviously worked together in the past, so I know your business pretty well. And I'm really pleased to have you on the show today. And I think actually this is going to be quite a unique episode because I don't think we've discussed a lot of what we're about to discuss on the show before. And I know that for a lot of our listeners, this is going to be a really quite valuable episode. But before we get into that, just for the benefit of all of our listeners, Kev, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, your background is in engineering and you've got an MBA, if I remember rightly. You're an ops director. You've worked for some big companies like Amazon and Marks and Spencer's. And here you are investing in HMOs and running a HMO business. So tell us a little bit about how we ended up where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I was always, you could say, a massive nerd when I was younger, you'd say. And I was always obsessed with getting all these degrees and designations and things. And now I'm doing something where I really didn't need to do any of that. And I think I went through this journey of not knowing what I wanted to do. And that's why I did all those things. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I wanted to just build up these credentials that would help give me choice once I figured it out. And the thing is, when I worked for these companies and doing these degrees, I realized I wasn't really passionate about them. I like the learnings and I like going through that journey and exploring things, but I wanted to create my own thing. And it wasn't until I discovered property that I realized here's this opportunity for me to do that and own my destiny and leverage these different skill sets. Now, in terms of what my background was, as you mentioned, I did an MBA, I did an engineering degree, and I did that both in the UK and in Canada, as I'm half Canadian. After I graduated from engineering, I worked between Canada and the UK for an engineering firm before doing my MBA and then moving off to Amazon, off to the US for Amazon to work in logistics and supply chain. And I did that for many, many years before going off to Marks and Spencer's in logistics as well. It was super useful for me in terms of the type of skills and the experience and working my way up. But I knew I wanted something more. I wanted to own a business. And I could see those in property were able to do that and flex this level of creativity. And not just creativity in terms of things like design that you see on Instagram, which is obviously great and things that really draw your attention. But for me, it was a creativity of assessing deals and finding opportunities that others haven't seen. And I was like, I want to do some of that. And I think I could do that better than others can as well.
Yeah.
But I also did a bit of construction management too. And then I discovered that, I wanted to leverage my background to do this for others because I could see how complex this could be. And there's so much conflicting information out there. And that's what kind of moved me into developing these for other people as well.
And Angelina, when Kev told you that he kind of maybe had enough of the corporate life and wanted to build his own real estate business, how did you feel about this? Or was it actually something that the two of you planned together?
Yeah, I mean, it was very much a shock when he first said it because you get used to that salary coming in every month. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is a big step. This is a big risk. But I knew that he had the skill set and the drive just to make something of it because he has passion in everything that he does. So I trusted him and I've always trusted him to go for it. So I'm always there to support him. And yeah, initially I was in the thick of motherhood. So I wasn't always there in the beginning. So I've only joined in the last 2 years, would you say?
Focused wise,
yeah, in the last 2 years.
And am I right in thinking that a large part of your role is the design element of the projects and actually of the brand itself? Because this is actually more than just a portfolio for you guys, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. I mean, for me, the design just comes straight from my childhood. I have a stepfather who is a developer himself. So he's developed a number of family homes for us as children. So I was always surrounded by it and I have passion for design. So I did it through high school and that ultimately led to a career, funny enough, in fashion. That's where I started out. So I was a personal stylist. So I guess how that translates across to invest is really understanding their needs and wants when it comes to design. And if you're not hitting that mark, then, I guess they want to contribute to that. So it's listening to what they're saying and translating that through the colors and the design itself. So,
Kev, I've always thought you were well dressed, and actually now I understand exactly why. Because Angelina dresses you.
yeah. Well, I'm used to that. And I spent the last 10 years around like VPs and directors and executives. So,
yeah.
and, from start of the morning to end of night. But doing that as well while trying to develop your first few HMOs, and I would be up painting at night and covered in paint, and then I'd have to rock into meetings on camera and my, business up top, but covered in paint from down below was kind of the situation. But
it worked.
But it worked.
Yeah. Yeah, so I feel that background is really set us up for success, because then when I met Kevin, we actually developed 3 family homes of our own, one in Arizona, one in Chepstow, and now in Cardiff. So throughout the years, I've enhanced my skills in that area just through developing our own brand in our own home. So I know how to get this high-end design at a budget, which is massive for the investors.
Yeah, and such an important part of the process of investing in HMO as well, finding that sweet spot, that real intersection of getting the very best sort of bang for every buck that you spend, which
Yeah.
is an absolute critical skill to master. You guys are obviously life partners. You're also now business partners. How is that? Does that present challenges of its own? Are you a great team together, or do you have to keep things in check?
I know you definitely want to answer that one first. I'll let you, you take that one. Dangerously.
Definitely requires a lot of patience. Now, if I was to summarize it, I would say that, 3 sort of the main things to focus on is it takes time, communication, and actually understanding skill set. So when I talk about time, I mean, it's actually taken us years to get to the level we're at. I said before, Kevin started out on his own and I came in and later on, so he had to learn a whole new way of working with me and finding our balance. So it's taken time to get to this point. And then communication, huge for us. We have a meeting every Monday and every Friday. Monday is, let's talk about the priorities for the week, where Kevin needs to be, what marketing have we got, what social media have we got. We recently hired a operations manager, to Angelou. She's fantastic, to look at our social media, and she looks after our tenants. So we're talking about all those elements, and making sure that Kevin is where he needs to be most of the time, because he very rarely looks at his diary.
I think that that's a really great insight into actually the realities of being sort of business partners and life partners. And I know a lot of people listening today, it will be the same for them as well. I'm interested to know, you mentioned communication. Do you guys have really clear and quite well set roles and responsibilities in your business? It sounds like you obviously operate it like business owners. There's jobs that need to be, you sit down and have meetings, but do you have quite clear roles and responsibilities, and therefore a certain amount of accountability to one another?
Yes, 100%. And that would be my third point, is actually skill set. So understanding each other's skill set. And then from there, the job roles are formed. So Kevin is 100% the numbers man. He's there on site on a weekly basis, managing the build teams, and he finds the properties for the investors. And then I'm back at home in the office, and I look at the design side. I'm the social media side, running the office elements. So you've got the invoicing, you've got the tenants, and that's a huge one for us, tenants and marketing. We've really learned a lot in the last year in relation to the marketing, which because we broke away from the agencies marketing our properties, and we now do it ourselves. So very clear roles, because if they do cross, then it just adds another element of difficulty. But we've definitely fine-tuned that.
I'm really glad to hear that. And it does worry me when, in fact, not even sort of life partners in business together, but any business partners don't have those sorts of roles and responsibilities very clearly set, because I think it's so incredibly important with so many moving parts in businesses like this to have that kind of chain of command on certain tasks and projects and things that need to be done. Kev, tell us a little bit about what the business looks like now then. Obviously, when we were working together, we were just kind of getting the strategy right and getting the first few projects off the ground, and you were making some great progress, but it's really moved on since then. And actually, I think you found a whole new arm, this passion that you were really just doing for yourselves to actually help other people now. But I'm really interested to know a little bit more about what the business looks like today.
I mean, I knew I was going to really focus on portfolio building for others right from the outset. I knew construction was something I was really passionate about, and I knew that my background was really well suited to this, and I could offer something to other investors that may have had some opportunities from others that may have been in this space. So I've always had an eye on that and how I could build this up. In order to set ourselves up ideally for that, we've got one main arm that is sourcing development to find these properties, design them, develop them, manage them, license them, everything to get an HMO ready. It then moves into our lettings business that we've set up to offer best in class, all these things that others in the area just do not offer, specifically for our target market. So that way, when we do our sourcing development, we know exactly what our target market is after. And then we've got a final rung, which is the construction side, which we're continuing to develop. So we can bring all of the development and construction in-house and make additional savings for our investors as well, and having better control and scalability. And then finally, we've got our own investment arm of where we do our own portfolio as well, of course. So, and that's the final piece of the puzzle for us.
So for the benefit of our listeners then, this sounds to me like what I would call a really bespoke, almost turnkey service, like an armchair service for investors who perhaps can't do this sort of thing themselves for, I imagine, a whole host of reasons. What sort of people do you tend to find you end up working with, Kev? And why is there a demand and even a need for a service like the ones that you guys are offering?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this type of service could be suitable for anyone interested in HMOs. And I'll just walk you through what that could look like. Okay. From the outset, as you can imagine, those who want to get involved with HMOs, they don't know how to do it. It's really risky to get involved into this space now if you don't know what you're doing, especially with Labour coming in, right? Because there's a lot of legislation which almost feels like they're trying to catch you out. If you miss a single thing or an admin error, they'll catch you out. Okay. Yeah. So you need to make sure you follow everything by the book. You've got to know your code. You've got to know how to get it to an EPCC rating. You've got to know how you ensure you've got your contracts written correctly and how you manage them through. And we do that day in and day out. So it's very systemized for us. It's not difficult when you do this all the time. You do it for your first one, it can be really challenging on how you approach that. But on a day-to-day, that's our business. It's very straightforward for us, right? So we take care of all of that. You've got to know where to find the properties, what type of property, what is that build cost going to be, what is that revaluation. As we're doing the same properties in the same area with the same markets, with the same rents coming out of them and very similar designs and inputs with the same refurbs, those are all elements that we already know the numbers, and we've got case study after case study after case study where it's rinse and repeat, and then removes all that risk and uncertainty for an investor. So for someone that's starting out, it's very simple. But also you've got all these other benefits such as trade discounts and making huge savings, where a builder will tell you their retail price and putting a build margin on top. We do everything at our trade discount that's taken years to build up, which has 20 to 50% saving. And we do that at cost with receipts on everything so they can see everything and get the benefit from all that. So whatever management or sourcing fees there would be is savings and then some from those trade discounts as well. So there's those benefits. So that's obviously a great incentive for those who are just entering the space, but even those who are experienced that want to take advantage of that, and allows them to scale. Hey, I want to do more of these. I can actually save even more money with you. So if you can then get 30% with it fully managed and taken care of still, they're able to take advantage of that. But there's also an additional market of those who might be international, for example, right? So those who can't get access to the locations to do this, we're able to take care of it for them. And the level of detail and reporting and systems in place, gives them a lot of confidence to know, hey, my investment from afar is well taken care of.
It's so funny because we've been, I think, recording now for 3 years on the show. I think we're 300 and something episodes in. And this is the first time we've really had anyone on and discussed in detail turnkey HMO services. And actually, for so many people, you've just outlined all of those reasons why it's actually incredibly valuable and sometimes just completely necessary. And you can see it, can't you? If you're an overseas investor but want to get involved in the real estate property market, that is such a big challenge, isn't it? Logistically, just actually viewing properties. I mean, let's make it really simple for a sec. Just actually arranging a viewing in a timely fashion. Then there's all the hurdles of actually meeting builders. Before we hit record, there was a couple of funny examples I think you shared, Kevin, and it was really simple. It was like, actually, you're waiting for IKEA or wherever you might get your furniture to come from, and they get the delivery wrong and it all arrives the following day. And actually, it sounds really small and almost menial, but as a business owner or a busy person, with family and a corporate job, whatever it might be, that is a huge problem because a missed delivery then actually can result in, an overrun on the program. That costs time, it costs money. There's all sorts of circumstances. You might even miss the deadline on a tenant moving else, something like that. So there's actually so many reasons why just having someone to handle everything for you makes so much sense. And actually,
It really
not
does.
just from a time and practical point of view, but actually even just from an economic point of view as well. So I guess let's put myself in investor's shoes for a minute. Can you, Angelina, just explain how the process would work? So if I'm approaching you guys and I'm interested in investing in HMOs, and I really like the sound of you. I've heard you on the HMO podcast. I'm thinking these guys are great. And, I've seen their stuff and it looks really good, but I don't quite know how it all works. Like what's actually involved? What sort of risks am I actually taking? Can you explain the sort of process that a turnkey investor would go through working with somebody like yourselves with a service like the one that you have?
I think you're probably best placed to talk about this.
But is this one for Kev Operations then?
I'd say, yeah. So, we do a lot more than just finding a property and then handing the keys of an HMO at the end. Our goal is to do everything to setting them up on understanding what they're dealing with in terms of finances, how they approach it, as well as managing that property at the end. And that allows us to give that confidence to an investor to know that your investment that you're hoping going to hold for 30 years plus, right, is well taken care of. It's built to last, not just to have an HMO. Or how is that going to tenant? How are we going to, how are we going to feel that? What is the maintenance down the road? So you know that it's properly taken care of to hit the ROI. That's it provides what it says on the tin. We will, as I mentioned, we are really focused on the target market locations, refurbs, and rinse and repeating. So we already know that detail. So we know exactly what we need from an investor, and we're able to communicate that really clearly. So it's a very clear roadmap of what we need that we've rinsed and repeated. So it removes all that uncertainty, which is the first thing an investor thinks of. Yeah, but what if? Well, here's all the examples to show you about how that's such a consistent, repeatable process, and it removes that risk.
You have an investor pack, don't we, that we put together. So when somebody comes along, this is what Kevin puts together to know what to expect, basically, the numbers.
And
Right.
on that one, Kev, as well, I assume, and I think this is one of the great things, if you're just starting out and even just trying to figure out where to invest, that process of area evaluation, it's really, really important, understanding that local market and understanding the data. But actually, you've done this. This is what you're talking about. That consistency is actually you saying, look, here's the data, here's the rent, here's the sales values, here's the valuations that we recently had, which is so difficult for a new investor getting into the market. And I completely appreciate it. And it's one of those things that you realize over time that it does come with experience. There's only so much risk that you can actually mitigate as a new investor. You are ultimately, if you haven't done it, always going to be relying on best guesses, maybe even assumptions, taking other people's word for it. And that's really important. There's a space for that. But actually, you are that expert. So it's actually people and investors can entrust you with all of that information because you are that single point of contact with all of that data to support the entire model. And I think that that's worth highlighting because I think that the value of that is sometimes overlooked. So many people think that it's quite easy just to pick a location, pick up something on a map and understand the numbers or try and get their numbers to work in that location. The reality is actually it's really not as simple and it's really not that easy to actually get hold of all the data that you need, is it, to build that picture. So there's that element of you guys being able to provide a lot of information to give a degree of reliability, a picture of consistency. What else as an investor would I be able to get from a service like yours? And what sort of problems can you take away from me?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just talking to an investor earlier today who wants to get involved and it's their first time doing that. And when you're just starting at your first rental property, you're in a different position than those who have other HMOs in your portfolio. Okay. A lender has different checks they'll do on you and experience, and it reduces how many lenders are available to you. How do you approach a broker? What sort of information will they need? What AML, anti-money laundering checks will they want to do? If you're an international investor, that's a little bit different on what you need to check. How you go about certifications. All this can take a really long time if you don't know what you're doing, but because we've done it before again and again and again, we can already go to the investor and say, look, I'm going to stay right now. You're going to need this, 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 and this. And it saves a lot of time and uncertainty in thinking, would I always be asked this? And we can explain that very clearly. And it makes it really efficient for them. For investors that just do not have time to mess about, they're really busy with their day jobs, right, at senior levels. They'd love to see this just laid out, and that's what we do for them. And then it's holding their hand, and through the conveyancing, we do that annoying nagging to the solicitors and the agents to check on things, to make sure they're not just doing this, and we'll chase them to get it through. And what in parallel have it lined up with detailed scope of works and what the build is needed. And it's really hard to balance that as a new investor, whereas we've already got that systemized on what to do when. So they can feel confident that that's getting done at the right time. So as soon as they have those keys, they can hit the ground running with that build.
For so many people, that sort of reassurance and an almost shortcut will be completely invaluable, won't it? But I suppose it's not the entire picture. And I suppose part of the confidence from an investor's perspective in working with a company that can provide a turnkey solution is actually what that product at the end looks and feels and functions like, and how it actually performs in the market. Angelina, you're the design expert. And by the way, for anyone listening, go and check it out because it's next level stuff. I mean, it is absolutely incredible. But how do you approach the project to try and actually manage that, I suppose, that product at the end to make sure it delivers the results that investors and that you guys are looking for?
Well, initially, actually, when we talk about the sort of beginning stages and that initial chat with the investor, I actually come up with a design pack based on initial conversation with them and their particular investor that we have. He's on his third property with us, fourth.
We've got the 6 in conveyancing now. So it's
With us.
yeah.
Yeah, his personal style has actually evolved. So I will use Canva as kind of my main tool, as well as a Pinterest looking for design and inspo. And initially, he started off with, okay, I want to do exactly what you're doing, which is your branding, your colors. So we just talk about the elements that they want to nail from the get go, and then that's produced. And then they're like, yeah, okay, I love this. Next time, let's try and go for this. So second time around, then I produce more design packs. We go away, we have a discussion. It's sort of back and forth, trial and error. Then they find out what the newest trend is on the market in terms of color. So we've now, the second project we did with him, he said, right, love this element. Now I'd like to take it a little bit darker. So we went sort of more moodier tones for Project Henry, which I loved. I love experimenting and moving away from what our brand is. And then we saw the results of that. It was fantastic. Project Henry is actually one of my favorite. And then third time around, he changed his mind again, and he was like, I'd like to go more for the sage color because this is kind of the popular colors now. So yeah, it's just that continuous communication about trends, what's popular in the market, their personal likes. Because of, again, I think we touched on it earlier, what they see on Instagram, they ask us to bring it to life through their properties. So yeah, it's that sort of back and forth conversation about meeting their needs.
And they evolve with time, right?
They do, yeah.
Definitely changed. But I think the big thing is, and me being the numbers person as well, is controlling the extent of that, right? Because we have a very target market, which is students, and we have a specific price point that we go through, okay? A student will not pay above that amount. They cannot do it. We are at the top end of the market, and we know what we need to produce for that. But then I will always be the one to say, everything we do has an ROI to it. So, and there's a lot of temptations out there on Instagram, and we definitely work through you to make that very clear to investors to say, look, marble tiles doesn't make sense for this market. That's not what we're going for. Okay. That will not get your revaluation increased, and the ROI on that, the payback won't make sense. Okay. So we'll hit maximal revaluations and maximal rent in our market. And here's the limit of what we can do. And we have to design within the adjacencies of that.
So for example, the wood slats is a popular thing, but if the budget is low, then we can go back with we found a fantastic wallpaper that can be used, and it actually looks great. It looks modern, fresh. The students love it.
This is the sort of stuff as well, isn't it, that if you haven't done these sorts of projects before and you haven't got the experience of producing that product, testing it in the market, getting that feedback from customers, it's really difficult to know whether or not it works or whether or not it's even worth it. And of course, by the time you spent the money or even the time trying to deliver it, of course, it's too late. So another great advantage. And I've got some questions that I want to ask you guys today about just really your thoughts about the direction of travel, risks, I suppose, more macro than micro to the model, to the HMO space, and maybe even just to the wider property market. But before we get there, just sort of on the theme of design and that customer piece and trying to produce that result with confidence, are you finding that from the tenant's perspective, from the customer's perspective, there are changing trends that you're having to adapt to as well, or new opportunities that you're discovering because you're doing the sort of volume and the amount of activity that you're doing.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, styles are always evolving and changing, and investors always come to us with new ideas. And I think Kevin touched on it with, we just obviously have to keep them in check with budgets. Lighting, we're seeing everywhere across, getting the right lighting in every property. And that one is a tough one to manage because, yeah, lighting can be expensive. But yeah, and I think to appeal to the students, they want to stay with the current trends. Um, so yeah, making sure we do tick those boxes for investors is really important, and always doing our research on what those current trends are and presenting it to them every time we do a new property. And as it happens, the investor that we do work with, he's changed slight tweaks every time. So it's learning to move with that. Initially, I was like, well, we can't do that, this is our brand. But, we slowly realized that actually evolving is fun, change is fun, and people are interested in that.
I'll tell you what, that's actually something that's super going to really digress from what others I see saying on Instagram, actually, of what's important for our market. Okay. Because we're designing for students at the premium end of the student market, not professionals. Okay. So students, and all of ours are on joint group tenancies, severally liable tenancies. Okay. So not individuals. So all en suites is not required for us by any means. Good ratios of bathrooms is required, but that could mean for a 6-bedroom HMO, we go for a 2-to-1 ratio at least. So 3 or 4 bathrooms, 6 bedrooms is perfect. More than that is overkill. We don't see it in the revaluation, and we don't see it in the rent that we can get, because we're already at the cap of what a student can make. So more bathrooms doesn't benefit us. What is important though, location is always critical, always. Access to the property is critical. And depending on which university or campus we're going for, there's different ones in our location. Parking may be important, as well as bike storage. Okay, so those are always critical for us. The design, though, of being clean and fresh and maintained that way is important. So you can have an HMO that looks great year 1, but you need to design it in a way that it's going to look great in year 4 or 5. And that's important. So if you've got these big lush carpets, for example, they look great on year 1, but they get flattened out in sections by year 3 or 4. And it just doesn't look fresh anymore. So we've actually moved towards LVT, even in bedrooms now, for that reason, because it stays fresh all the time. It's a little bit more money, but it really stays fresh for the test of time to look you the best in class for years to come.
Yeah.
But also you've got to have processes in place to make them look consistently clean and fresh throughout. If you have a group of students and they're a bit messier and you have to do showings now for that property later in the year, you've got to make sure that is very easily cleaned and you can hold them to keeping it clean throughout. So if your systems aren't in place to do that, you can have a beautiful property, but if it's looked like a hoarder in there when you do a showing, it's not going to look great. So those elements actually are really critical, as opposed to just what type of flat panels are used.
Some great advice around durability there, and I completely agree. And actually, on your latter point about maintaining HMOs, again, for investors that probably know that this is all a bit too much for themselves, the importance of regular inspections, of regular maintenance, of having policies and processes that are managed in the right way, that value can't be underestimated, especially in the kind of the higher end space of the market. It's very easy, I think, for properties that look great day 1 to look not so great, almost on day 2. And it's quite disheartening, actually, when you go in, isn't it? And you see, I think there's expectations that we have to manage. Properties are going to get lived in. They're not. It's like cars, they're not going to be brand new forever, but you can absolutely kind of stretch out the lifespan of properties. And I think make sure that year on year, rooms are filled, properties are filled, because if you get that bit wrong, nothing's working. If you end up with a property that's vacant, actually, it's about as bad as it really gets. And it can boil down to something as simple as just good management, good policies and procedures. And if you're an investor that doesn't live near your investment, or you live overseas, or you're just too busy to get there, or you don't know how to do this sort of stuff, actually, you might be able to figure out how to buy something even do the refurbishment, but can you service this property over the long term? Can you give it what it needs to actually deliver over the long term? I think that is a big piece that a lot of people do overlook, and it's much more challenging than people think. Kev, you're obviously managing a lot of the projects, and for investors that are using a turnkey service, one of the great benefits is that you will handle the contractors and the actual development process. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the problems that exist with builders and contractors and development disappear. How do you manage that? You know, that you've got this background in operations and things like that. What sort of advice could you share, or what sort of things are you looking for to help mitigate those risks yourself?
I mean, number one, most important thing, without question, is an extremely detailed scope of work. And new investors will always underestimate this to say, I'll figure this out and I'll deal with this later or add it on later. Even if the builder is absolutely honest to God, the best that's out there, they're very busy, and builders, they need to keep busy to manage their overheads, right? So, you know, they plan other works. As soon as they finish your project and the time you wanted, they need to move on to other ones. So if they are going to take on other aspects for your project, they need to make it really worth their while, which won't be the normal rate per hour. It'll be a much higher rate because they have to, okay, to say, is it really worth me to add these pieces on? Plus the risk if I allow myself to add these things on. But if you get that from the outset, you'll get the best rates, and it removes all that disagreement that you can have later on, okay? So really important, really break down that detail from the outset and work with your architect to make sure you've got it all planned on the plans, because they will follow that like it is exactly the roadmap for that project. So if it's not on there, it won't be on in your building, okay? So don't expect it to be.
Great piece of advice. And, you know, it horrifies me when people go into projects without, full sets of drawings, M&E plans and things like that. Because inevitably what happens is that the builder expected something was meant to be done in this way. You expected it to be done in a different way. And of course, there's a cost to the fact that, it may need rectifying afterwards. So important, but actually not that straightforward if you don't know what you're doing and if you don't even know who to get to do this. And I think one of the big mistakes I've seen many, many times is relying on builders to also do the project management and all of the planning. That's kind of like just giving them, the kind of scope to do what they want. Actually, contractors need managing. They need to be given plans. The plans is what holds them to account, isn't it? So it's so incredibly important to get that piece right. And actually, I know for a fact, because this is a conversation I had, that some builders, not all, but some construction groups, they will actually have a target internally to raise a certain number of extras as a percentage of the contract value on the job. There's some big construction firms, and their targets are in the regions of 50%, 50% on top of contract value through extras. They will they won't make the issues, but they will take advantage of any opportunity to give you a bill for an extra. And it may well be legitimate if it wasn't spec'd out, but that is the difference of actually making sure it's well spec'd and it's all on the plans and not doing so. Some really good advice there, I think. Kev, we're probably sort of towards needing to wrap up our episode today, but do you have a bit of a high-level example of a project that you've done for a client that you could just share with us, just to help us understand numbers and timelines, and I suppose give a bit of context to this sort of a service that some of our listeners might want to take advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take an example of one we just completed refinance on, which is a really typical project for us. It's called Project Henry. Okay, you might have seen it. It's got quite dark ceilings. We're in something a little bit different on this one because the investor wanted more blacks and a bit of a darker theme, moodier theme for it. So this was a 4-bedroom property in decent condition. Normally, the properties we buy are absolutely stinking, and this one was a little bit better condition, to be honest. So we bought it for 280. Okay, because it was in better condition and it had really the size and scale. This one absolutely had the size. We could have gone sui generis if we wanted to, because it was larger. We could easily make it larger, but we knew we'd have challenges with planning permission to go for 7-bed and up, as is required for that. But it was very much as straightforward, quick turnaround project as a 6-bed, which is permitted development in our area, as it was a non-Article 4 area. Okay, so 280, 4-bed property, and we converted it into a 6-bedroom, 4-bathroom HMO. And we needed to add 3 bedrooms to the property. We also had to take care of some damp on the ground floor. We always do a complete full rewire anyway, because we plan for the investors to hold these for 30 years plus. So full rewire, new heating system. We do not go back to brick unless we need to. If the existing plaster is good, we overskim. Completely unnecessary in my mind if it doesn't add value or longevity to the building. Other than the area, obviously, where the damp was corrected, which we get certified for that longevity and security. And the total build cost ended up being about 110,000, which matched extremely accurately to what our predetermined build was. And all labor is fixed when we do builds. The only variable would be materials, which is all receipt driven. So very close to previous projects as well. And the revaluation we got for this was 450,000. So, and that's on a bricks and mortar as well. So, that ends up being about a 30% ROI for the investor based on the rent that we get for the property, and that's after all bills included. Obviously, how they go about financing changes what their numbers end up being, but this is a very standard property for us. We do have others that have come in much higher ROIs as well, but that one's a typical result that they typically see. You'll see it on Instagram, and it's rented really well. The demand's been great for students in the area. We've managed to put in some really big showers in this one, which they really love.
They love those, yeah.
And because it's a bigger property, it had really nice sized rooms, and we did full landscaping as well with a great outdoor theme for this one, which has been a great result for the students in the area as well.
I mean, I imagine there's quite a few people listening and just sort of scratching their chin at the minute thinking, hang on a minute, I'm doing all this work myself for a similar return, or maybe even not quite a return as good as that. And actually, there's people out there that could just do it all for me, streamline the process, take advantage of all of their discounts and their skill and experience and contact, and produce a better result. Really, really, really interesting. Guys, it's been a fascinating conversation. And I think, like I said at the beginning of today's episode, quite a unique episode because we haven't talked about something like this on the show. Actually, we know that there are a lot of people in our community that want to invest in HMOs, but just don't have the ability for a whole host of reasons. So chatting to you guys about something like this, I think will help a lot of people almost believe in the possibility of actually doing it in a different way and still achieving really incredible results, which I think is so hard sometimes when you look at the figures from very sort of bird's eye view without understanding all of the detail. It can be really tricky to even get to a point where you think there's any scenario where it could be possible to do all of this and pay for the service and bring in the sort of the numbers that I need to make it all worthwhile. So thank you for sharing this. Before we finish up, do you have any advice for aspiring investors, whether it's investors that want to do this themselves, investors that want to work with anybody else, but do you have any advice for aspiring investors that want to start or grow their portfolios, perhaps to ensure that they make kind of the most of whatever it is that they decide to do?
Yeah, for sure. I think the most important thing is focus on who you're trying to service with an HMO, right? So HMO is absolutely a targeted product because the market you're trying to service, the area that you locate the property in, and how you develop it is critical. So you need to understand how you're going to approach that, whether you use a turnkey solution like us or someone similar, or you go about it yourself. Getting that right is critical. Spending time to figure it out is very important, and nailing down the scope of works on how you're going to approach it is key as well. Okay. If you're going to approach a turnkey developer to do that for you, you want them to show you not just how they approach that, but case study after case study and how they've done it before, because you want to go into that and know, okay, you're telling me it's this, prove it to me. How do you know that? They should be able to show you a whole list. You don't want them to be learning with you. You want them to have gone through those learnings already, because that's what they're there for, and take care of it. Plus, you want to make sure, well, show me how I can trust you. When you go to a builder, right, there's always a risk they're putting margins on top of margins and things like that. And are they hiding things in their numbers? But that's what your project manager is there for. I want to see all that data and information, and how are you going to respond to these issues and problems that could arise? What is your approach? What are your systems in place? What's your reporting, itemization of all that information? So have them show you that. And if they're not prepared with it, they haven't expected that question, and they haven't been through that journey before.
I think there's some absolutely brilliant advice there, and I suspect for anyone who's listening that hasn't got a pen, they're thinking, "Oh God, I really wish I'd have been writing some notes." So some fantastic sort of little nuggets there, guys. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today and hear a bit more about the progress that you've been making and the services that are out there for investors that can't do this themselves. Angelina, for anyone listening today that perhaps wants to connect, find out a little bit more about what you guys do specifically, and maybe is interested in even working with you, how best can they contact you?
There's several ways. We have our Instagram and our website, but more specifically, we have our Instagram. There's a link there to connect with Kevin for coffee chats. So there's a diary link there, so you can just complete all the information and you can speak with Kevin. What's that in it? Yeah, he's available every day, 4 till 5. I think we reserved slots for an initial conversation just to get the ball rolling. And I would say, I think it's worth doing that. So
Fantastic. Well, Kevin, I suspect you're going to be going out for a few coffees, mate.
here's hoping.
Guys, thank you for joining me on the show. It has been an absolute pleasure, a really interesting, fascinating conversation, and I can't wait to see where you take all of this, because the progress that you guys have been making as a business in the last couple of years has been really phenomenal. So well done to you, but thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thanks, Andy. Great to see you again.